Welcome to a new German New Medicine tutorial. Today we'll be talking about the uterus and fallopian tubes. I'm Dr. Melissa Sell and I'm excited to walk you through this today. If you're brand new to German New Medicine, I highly recommend checking out German New Medicine 101 before watching this video. The information contained in this presentation is intended for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice. On this page, you can see my sources that I used in the creation of this presentation. And let's get started. So the basic premise of German New Medicine, if you are brand new to this paradigm, is that all tissue changes, other than due to injury, poisoning, or deficiency, are due to specific intentional biological adaptations controlled from our brains. The adaptations are initiated by something that catches you off guard, a conflict shock, some type of traumatic event caught an individual off guard, and their body initiated a biological program to adapt them to their situation to give them best opportunity for survival or procreation, basically making their life longer or the lives of their offspring longer. And in German New Medicine, we work backwards. So we look at the symptoms that a person has, and then that tells us the story of what they experience. So something like a uterine infection, which is relevant for our topic today, indicates that that individual experienced a procreation, implantation, or gender conflict. Most symptoms show up during the healing phase. So once the person has already gone through some type of emotional trauma or conflict shock, has already resolved it, and now their body is going through the repair and reconstruction phase. So we want to identify and become aware of the source of the conflict so that we can prevent this from happening again in the future. So let's talk about the uterus and the fallopian tubes. So the uterus itself is the home of the fetus. The myometrium are the uterus muscles. The perimetrium is the outer layer of the uterus, and then the endometrium is the inner lining. And we also have the fallopian tubes, which connect the ovaries to the uterus. So there's just your basic anatomy of the parts that we'll be dealing with today. And neurologically, the uterus and fallopian tubes are controlled from the brain stem. So the uterus and the fallopian tubes, they are of endodermal origin. So they are of the oldest tissue type, and therefore they're controlled from the oldest region of the brain, which is the brainstem. They share the same brain area as the prostate, which you can see through this cross section of the brainstem is kind of right there in the center. So what is the conflict? What is the thing that's going to catch a person off guard that's going to affect either the uterus or fallopian tubes? This first variety is a procreation or an implantation conflict. Issues of infertility, a miscarriage, abortion, loss of a child or a grandchild. If you want to be pregnant or you want to become pregnant desperately, or you're really not wanting to be pregnant or to become pregnant, these all can constitute a procreation or implantation conflict. And so these can be very subtle, they can be very extreme. You know, the low-level fear that I really don't want to become pregnant. If that is, if you were caught off guard all of a sudden and you were like, oh my gosh, I might be pregnant and I really don't want to be, that can constitute a conflict shock. And remember, your body is responding to that experience. Now, not every single person that suffers a miscarriage or is having issues getting pregnant or really doesn't want to become pregnant, not everyone will experience those life events as a conflict shock. It's very individual. It depends on that particular person, their perception of the world. So it's not a one-to-one, this conflict will always cause this issue for a person, but if a person does indeed have these type of symptoms, they did have one of these types of conflicts. So another variety of conflict that fits into this category is a gender conflict, which Dr. DeHammer describes as like an ugly conflict with a male or with a partner. So being disregarded as a woman, some type of degrading abuse, feeling humiliated or disrespected, a divorce, a breakup, some type of distressing appointment at the gynecologist could cause this type of conflict, being insulted. You can see there are so many different experiences that can fit into these categories. And so just being aware that, okay, if you're having one of these issues, you had one of these conflicts, and looking at it, okay, what does this look like for me? Because it may not be word for word what is on the screen, but it's going to be in this general category along this general theme. So now we'll look at the first biological law, which is the connection between your psyche, your brain, and your organs. So when your psyche, when you perceive, when you have this conflict shock, it comes in through your senses, and immediately your brain is impacted in a very specific region depending on the content of the conflict. So again, your body, your nervous system is all extremely sensitive to the experiences that you're having. So a procreation or gender conflict, that's a different biological program than a death fright conflict. And so your body immediately perceives this, immediately knows, okay, if she's having this conflict, this is the biological program that is just automatically programmed into the human body to activate. And so there'll be an impact in the brainstem, and then there'll be proliferation of the uterus mucosa cells or fallopian tubes. So what's the biological meaning? Why the heck would your body do this? And biologically, the point of the thickening of the uterus is to increase the likelihood of a fertilized egg implanting. And so in nature, biologically, there's no such thing really as an organism not wanting to be pregnant. It's just the way of nature to reproduce and proliferate offspring. And so whether you really, really want to be pregnant, really, really don't want to be pregnant, the biological program is to let's make it more likely that you will become pregnant, which is the point of thickening the uterus lining. So that's why this whole thing is going on. Let's look at the second biological law now. This will help us to understand the details of what happens during each phase. This second biological law is one of the most important things to learn in German New Medicine because it will help you make sense out of whatever you are experiencing on the physical level, on the psychological level. You need to be aware of these connections so that you can manage your own health and navigate your own experience. So during the conflict, so this is when you're active with the gender conflict, you're actively, feeling this worry, this implantation, procreation conflict. You really want to be pregnant, really don't want to be pregnant. You're actively upset about it. It's on your mind throughout the day. And so when you are in conflict, your body shifts into a state of prolonged sympathetic dominance. And so in this state, on the level of the psyche, you're compulsively thinking, you're preoccupied with the conflict. On the level of the brain, there's a sharp ring impact going to be seen in the CT scan in the brainstem. And then there's proliferation, like we said, of uterine tissue or the fallopian tubes. So it's going to be in proportion to the intensity of the conflict regarding, okay, so how much, how quickly is this lining going to proliferate? And so if it's a very intense conflict and you're really upset about it, the body responds to that intensity and that duration as well. And so it's going to be continuing to proliferate this tissue. Especially when it comes to, let's say you have this tested at your medical doctor and they say, oh, this is aggressive or malignant. What that means is that there's an intense active conflict going on right now. And so high division simply means that it's more active and more intense. And so the lining, that uterine mucosa, is thickening. So if the conflict is long-lasting and the cells just keep proliferating, this person may be diagnosed with a uterus or an endometrial cancer. It may either grow as a cauliflower shape as a uterus cancer or in the flat plane, and then you may get diagnosed with endometrial hyperplasia. If the growth forms inside the fallopian tubes, there may be blockage and also painful ovulation during the conflict and the healing phases. Also, when you are in conflict, you may have more intense periods, more painful periods, because of the fact you are in a prolonged sympathetic phase. So the conflict will go on until there is a resolution. Normally, the best resolution is a natural resolution. So in the case of wanting or not wanting a pregnancy, it's the pregnancy occurs or the pregnancy does not occur. That will be a very natural resolution and allow the woman to go back to her normal day-night rhythm and go on and proceed with the healing process. So this is the part that takes some mental work, some inner work to decide what is best for you, for your life, and realizing that this conflict, feeling upset in the way that you are, is a biological communication. It's not just something that stays in your head, not just a lifelong wish that hasn't been fulfilled. It's a signal that you're sending to your body. And that's the thing that most people, we just don't understand. No one ever taught us that our thoughts, the way that we're thinking about something, does have a profound biological impact. So conflict resolution can take many, many different forms, and it can take, different things for different people to get to the point where they are fully resolved with the conflict without the chance of a relapse back into it. Now the healing phase. So once you have resolved your conflict, you're going to move into a state of parasympathetic dominance. So you had the pendulum swung all the way to sympathetic, the stress phase, where your body is adapting. Now it swings back in the other direction. Now we're in the sympathetic phase where your body has to repair and remodel the tissue to get you back to pre-conflict state. And the way that it does that in this particular case is it uses bacteria and fungi to remove the uterine cells that are no longer needed. So your body recognizes, okay, we had those extra cells there for a while, they're no longer necessary, and so it's got a pre-programmed plan for removal. And the fungi and mycobacteria, those are the things that are going to remove those excess cells. And that is what a woman will experience as a uterine infection or uterine candidiasis. And there's discharge, and she may have swelling in her abdomen and pain. She might be having night sweats. And so this is typically what sends a person into the doctor to say, oh my goodness, I've got an infection, I've got something wrong with me. But the thing is, at this point, the process is already underway and the repair and reconstruction is taking place. Now, there are some complications that can occur during this phase. Endometritis is when, this is different than endometriosis, by the way, which will be covered in a different presentation. Endometritis is when there is swelling and inflammation in the uterus. You may also have a water retention conflict that is adding to the swelling and the pressure. And so that's something to keep in mind. Inflammation in the fallopian tubes, menorrhagia, and extreme bleeding during this time is also possible. But on the psyche level, you have resolved the problem. So your psyche should be in a state of relief regarding the gender procreation or implantation conflict. In the brain, there'll be a diffused ring in the brainstem, some brain edema. You may have a little dizziness or a dull headache during this time. And like we said, the tissue is being broken down in the uterus. The epileptoid crisis, now this is the halfway point, or once your body reaches the point of maximum vagotonia, maximum relaxation and swelling, this is the big squeeze to squeeze out the edema from the brain and the organ. During this time, you may have severe uterine cramps, muscle spasms, restlessness, cold sweats and shivers. This will typically happen during nighttime or the early morning at a time when you are the most relaxed. And then the second half of the healing phase, this is just continued remodeling and restoration, bringing your body back to a normal state. And again, you're relieved, the brain is repairing, and your body is being returned to normal function. So that wraps up that first conflict. Now, I also want to talk about the uterus muscle conflict, because this is different than the uterine mucosa and the fallopian tubes. So this has to do with a slightly different character of conflict. It's called not being able to hold the fetus. So again, it's very similar. So it could have infertility issues, not getting pregnant, pregnancy complications where you lost the baby and you felt like you were unable to hold on to it, if you had your tubes tied or using some type of birth control, an unfulfilled desire for children. And this a woman can experience on behalf of her daughter or even granddaughter. And so if you had a grandchild who lost a baby and she was unable to hold on to the pregnancy, this may be the way that you respond. Again, it's very unique. The character of the exact conflict, you can see how it will be experienced a little bit differently about not being able to hold or grip. Some type of muscular activity is involved in this conflict. So let's look at the first biological law. So you have the not able to hold on to the fetus conflict. This region, the muscles of the uterus are controlled from the midbrain. And so during the conflict, there is proliferation of uterine muscle tissue. And again, the muscle tissue, the extra muscle, is meant to increase the strength and improve the ability to hold on to the fetus to prevent this type of conflict from happening again. So during the conflict active phase, when you're actively upset, when you are in conflict, there's uterine musculature proliferation in proportion to the intensity of the conflict. And this is what forms what are known as uterine fibroids. So we can maybe call the uterine fibroid a leiomyoma or a fibromyoma. And so the more intense, the longer the conflict, the larger the fibroid. Conflict resolution, like I said, very similar to the previous conflict. You're going to find a way to resolve the conflict, whether naturally or by a shift in your perception. During the healing phase is when the body will have cramping, you will have some discomfort, but the uterine muscle fibroids, unlike the proliferation of the tissue of the uterus mucosa, it actually remains beyond when the conflict has been resolved. Because again, the whole purpose of making more muscle tissue was so that you could reinforce the strength of the uterine musculature. So the body does not break these muscle fibroids down. They do remain. The epileptoid crisis, so you will still go through, a period of discomfort during the epileptoid crisis. If the fibroid is located close to the endometrium, there may be excessive bleeding during the epicrisis. And then the parasympathetic scarification, once you get through the healing crisis, there's continued remodeling and restoration. But even after the biological program is complete, the woman may continue to have heavier than normal menstrual periods. The thing that happens, especially if the fibroid is close to the endometrial lining, it increases the surface area. And so that means that there will be more surface area that needs to be covered with endometrial lining, which means more blood. And so she will experience heavier periods, and that will just persist. Okay, so that wraps up both of those biological programs for the uterine musculature and the uterus and the fallopian tubes. This is a reminder of the third biological law, the compass of German new medicine. I want to point out so that you know your way around this compass, the big arrow pointing at the brainstem. That's indicating that this is old brain tissue and the biological program of things controlled from the old brain, which is the brainstem, also the midbrain, is cellular proliferation during the conflict, and then typically cell removal with fungi and bacteria during the healing phase. We saw that that was a little bit different with the midbrain controlled uterine musculature. Remember the fourth biological law, diseases are not contagious. Bacteria and fungus are the optimizers of the healing phase. So the uterine candida, there's no dietary change, there's nothing that you would want to do to remove the candida because they're seasonal workers. They're there working off of instructions from the brain so that the uterus lining can be broken down, the uterus extra cells that were proliferated can be removed, because if you attempt to remove bacteria from your body becomes unable to break things down in the normal way, which then necessitates encapsulation And really, overall, it makes it more difficult for the body to work in its normal harmony and rhythm. So bacteria and fungus, they're our friends. They're there for a reason. If they happen to show up at a location on your body, that indicates that there is cleanup work to do. There's repair work that needs to be done, and those are the workers that are there to do it. The fifth biological law, disease is not an error. Your body is not making a mistake. The fibroids formed for a particular reason. The uterus proliferated for a particular reason. And, these biological programs, they developed and evolved at a time when life wasn't the way that it is now. And so you just have to remember and respect that this is very old biological programming, and the way to work with it is to understand it and to know it, because we can't unprogram our bodies. It's just, this is the way our biology functions. And so knowing it allows you to work with it instead of continually working against it, as most of modern medicine tends to do. Alrighty, well, that wraps it up for this tutorial. As a thank you for watching through to the end, I want to offer you $5 off the lifetime of your membership to the Resolve community. The Resolve community is my online conflict resolving resource library. It is a program that I have put together with my partner, and every single month what we do is we create an in-depth lesson on a particular conflict, and we take it apart and we show you what it's made out of, and we teach you different ways of thinking, different perceptions that you can have of yourself, the world, and other people that make you less likely to have that type of conflict. We've covered self-devaluation, we've covered existence conflict, isolation, abandonment, and refugee conflicts. This month we are covering relationships, and so the issues that cause shoulder pain. Last month we did feeling too slow conflicts regarding the thyroid gland. We have overview modules, conflict 101 and conflict 201, so that you can understand the nuances and the details of your own mind and your own perception. And so that's really what we specialize in, is making the big picture understanding of German New Medicine practically applicable in your day-to-day experience. So every month there is brand new video material, note pack, guided meditation, and then a journaling workbook to help you break down and work through these conflicts. We also have the Resolve Inner Circle, which is for practitioners and people helpers. If you work with others and you really want to understand the inner workings of the mind and how these perceptions and experiences come to be, we go through that in the Inner Circle. You also have access to our 10-module online masterclass in the mind called the Ever Better Life course. So we've got a lot of great stuff. We've got a lot of great ways that you can take your German New Medicine knowledge to the next level and be able to apply it in your life. I also do consultations with individuals. If you are curious about the symptoms that you have and they're freaking you out and you're worried about them and you really like to know, is there a new way I can look at this? I'd like to understand this from the German New Medicine perspective. And you can email me, drmelissa@gmail.com. You can schedule consultations right through my website. I just am here to help people to connect to this amazing research that Dr. Hammer did and make it so that you can use it in your life. You can resolve your conflicts and you can regain your health. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment if you have any suggestions or any requests for video tutorials you would like to see me make. And yeah, reach out if you need anything.